Chapter 16. But those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear for the future, have a life that's very brief and troubled. When they have reached the end of it, the poor wretches perceive too late that for such a long while they have been busied in doing nothing. Nor because they sometimes invoke death have you any reason to think it any proof that they find life long. In their folly they are harassed by shifting emotions which rush them into the very things they dread. They often pray for death because they fear it. And too, you have no reason to think that this is any proof that they are living a long time. The fact that the day often seems to them long, the fact that they complain that the hours pass slowly until the time set for dinner arrives, for whenever their engrossments fail them, they are restless because they are left with nothing to do, and they do not know how to dispose of their leisure or to drag out the time. And so they strive for something else to occupy them, and all the intervening time is irksome, exactly as they do when a gladiatorial exhibition has been announced, or when they are waiting for the appointed time of some other show or amusement. They want to skip over the days that lie between. All postponement of something they hope for seems long to them, yet the time which they enjoy is short and swift, and it is made much shorter by their own fault, for they flee from one pleasure to another, and cannot remain fixed in one desire. Their days are not long to them, but hateful. Yet on the other hand, how scanty seem the nights which they spend in the arms of a harlot or in wine. It is this also that accounts for the madness of poets in fostering human frailties by the tales in which they represent that Jupiter under the enticement of the pleasures of a lover doubled the length of the night. For what is it but to inflame our vices, to inscribe the name of the gods as their sponsors, and to present the excused indulgence of divinity as an example of our own weakness? Can the nights which they pay for so dearly fail to seem all too short to these men? They lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn. Chapter 17. The very pleasures of such men are uneasy and disquieted by alarms of various sorts, and at the very moment of rejoicing the anxious thought comes over them, how long will these things last? This feeling has led kings to weep over the power they possessed, and they have not so much delighted in the greatness of their fortune as they have viewed with terror the end to which it must some time come. When the king of Persia, in all the insolence of his pride, spread his army over the vast plains and could not grasp its numbers, but simply its measure, he shed copious tears because inside of 100 years not a man of such a mighty army would be alive. But he who wept was to bring upon them their fate, was to give some to their doom on the sea, some on the land, some in battle, some in flight, and within a short time was to destroy all those for whose 100th year he had such fear. And why is it that even their joys are uneasy from fear? Because they do not rest on stable causes, but are perturbed as groundlessly as they are born. But of what sort do you think those times are which even by their own confession are wretched? Since even the joys by which they are exalted and lifted above mankind are by no means pure. All the greatest blessings are a source of anxiety, and at no time is fortune less wisely trusted than when it is best. To maintain prosperity there is need of other prosperity, and in behalf of the prayers that have turned out well we must make still other prayers. For everything that comes to us from chance is unstable, and the higher it rises the more liable it is to fall. Moreover, what is doomed to perish brings pleasure to no one. Very wretched, therefore, and not merely short, must the life of those be who work hard to gain what they must work harder to keep. By great toil they attain what they wish, and with anxiety hold what they have attained. Meanwhile they take no account of the time that will never more return. New engrossments take place of the old. Hope leads to new hope, ambition to new ambition. They do not seek an end of their wretchedness, but change the cause. Have we been tormented by our own public honors? Those of others take more of our time. Have we ceased to labor as candidates? We begin to canvass for others. Have we got rid of the troubles of the prosecutor? We find those of a judge. Has a man ceased to be a judge? He becomes president of a court. Has he become infirm in managing the property of others at a salary? He is perplexed by caring for his own wealth. Have the barracks set Marius free? The consulship keeps him busy. Does Quintius hasten to get to the end of his dictatorship? He will be called back to it from the plough. Scipio will go against the Carthaginians before he is ripe for so great an undertaking. Victorious over Hannibal, victorious over Antiochus, the glory of his own consulship, the surety for his brothers, did he not stand in his own way, he would be set beside Jove. But the discord of civilians will vex their preserver. And, when as a young man he has scorned the honours that rivaled those of the gods, at length, when he is old, his ambition will take delight in stubborn exile. Reasons for anxiety will never be lacking, whether born of prosperity or wretchedness. Life pushes on in a succession of engrossments. We shall always pray for leisure, but never enjoy it. Chapter 18. And so, my dearest Paulinus, tear yourself away from the crowd, and, too much storm-tossed for the time you have lived, at length withdraw into a peaceful harbour. Think of how many waves you have encountered, how many storms, on the one hand, you have sustained in private life, how many, on the other, you have brought upon yourself in public life. Long enough has your virtue been displayed in laborious and unceasing proofs. Try how it will behave in leisure. The greater part of your life, certainly the better part of it, has been given to the state. Take now some part of your time for yourself as well. And I do not summon you to slothful or idle inaction, or to drown all your native energy in slumbers and the pleasures that are dear to the crowd. That is not to rest. You will find far greater works than all those you have hitherto performed so energetically, to occupy you in the midst of your release and retirement. You, I know, manage the accounts of the whole world as honestly as you would a stranger's, as carefully as you would your own, as conscientiously as you would the state's. You win love in an office in which it is difficult to avoid hatred. But nevertheless, believe me, it is better to have knowledge of the ledger of one's own life than of the corn market. Recall that keen mind of yours, which is most competent to cope with the greatest subjects, from a service that is indeed honourable but hardly adapted to the happy life, and reflect that in all your training in the liberal studies, extending from your earliest years, you were not aiming at this, that it might be safe to entrust many thousand pecks of corn to your charge, you gave hope of something greater and more lofty. There will be no lack of men of tested worth and painstaking industry. But plodding oxen are much more suited to carrying heavy loads than thoroughbred horses, and whoever hampers the fleetness of such high-born creatures with a heavy sack? Reflect, besides, how much worry you have in subjecting yourself to such a great burden. Your dealings are with the belly of man. A hungry people neither listens to reason, nor is appeased by justice, nor is bent by any entreaty. Very recently, within those few days after Gaius Caesar died, still grieving most deeply, if the dead have any feeling, because he knew that the Roman people were alive and had enough food left for at any rate 7 or 8 days while he was building his bridges of boats and playing with the resources of the empire. We were threatened with the worst evil that can befall men during a siege, the lack of provisions. His imitation of a mad and foreign and misproud king was very nearly at the cost of the city's destruction, and famine and the general revolution that follows famine. What then must have been the feeling of those who had charge of the corn market, and had to face stones, the sword, fire, and a Caligula? By the greatest subterfuge they concealed the great evil that lurked in the vitals of the state. With good reason, you may be sure, for certain maladies must be treated while the patient is kept in ignorance. Knowledge of their disease has caused the death of many. Chapter 19. Do you retire to these quieter, safer, greater things? Think you that it is just the same whether you are concerned in having corn from oversea poured into the granaries, unhurt either by the dishonesty or neglect of those who transport it, in seeing that it does not become heated and spoiled by collecting moisture and tallies in weight and measure, or whether you enter upon these sacred and lofty studies with the purpose of discovering what substance, what pleasure, what mode of life, what shape God has, what fate awaits your soul, where nature lays us to rest when we are freed from the body, what the principle is that upholds all the heaviest matter in the center of this world, suspends the light on high, carries fire to the topmost part, summons the stars to their proper changes, and ether matters, in turn, full of mighty wonders. You really must leave the ground and turn your mind's eye upon these things. Now, while the blood is hot, we must enter with brisk step upon the better course. In this kind of life there awaits much that is good to know. The love and practice of the virtues, forgetfulness of the passions, knowledge of living and dying, and a life of deep repose. The condition of all who are engrossed is wretched, but most wretched is the condition of those who labor at engrossments that are not even their own, who regulate their sleep by that of another, their walk by the pace of another, who are under orders in case of the freest things in the world, loving and hating. If these wish to know how short their life is, let them reflect how small a part of it is their own. Chapter 20. And so when you see a man often wearing the robe of office, when you see one whose name is famous from the forum, do not envy him. Those things are bought at the price of life. They will waste all their years in order that they may have 1 year reckoned by their name. Life has left some in the midst of their first struggles, before they could climb up to the heights of their ambition. Some, when they have crawled up through 1,000 indignities to the crowning dignity, have been possessed by the unhappy thought that they have but toiled for an inscription on a tomb. Some who have come to extreme old age, while they adjusted to it new hopes as if it were youth, have had it fail from sheer weakness in the midst of their great and shameless endeavors. Shameful is he whose breath leaves him in the midst of a trial when, advanced in years and still counting the applause of an ignorant circle, he is pleading for some litigant who is the veriest stranger. Disgraceful is he who, exhausted more quickly by his mode of living than by his labor, collapses in the very midst of his duties. Disgraceful is he who dies in the act of receiving payments on account, and draws a smile from his long-delayed heir. I cannot pass over an instance which occurs to me. Sextus Tyrrhenius was an old man of long-tested diligence, who, after his 90th year, having received release from the duties of his office by Gaius Caesar's own act, ordered himself to be laid out on his bed and to be mourned by the assembled household as if he were dead. The whole house bemoaned the leisure of its old master, and did not end its sorrow until the accustomed work was restored to him. Is it really such pleasure for a man to die in harness? Yet very many have the same feeling. Their desire for their labor lasts longer than their ability. They fight against the weakness of the body. They judge old age to be a hardship on no other score than because it puts them aside. The law does not draft a soldier after his 50th year. It does not call a senator after his 60th. It is more difficult for men to obtain leisure from themselves than from the law. Meantime, while they rob and are being robbed, while they break up each other's repose, while they make each other wretched, their life is without profit, without pleasure, without any improvement of the mind. No one keeps death in view. No one refrains from far-reaching hopes. Some men, indeed, even arrange for things that lie beyond life. Huge masses of tombs, and dedications of public works, and gifts for their funeral pyres and ostentatious funerals. But in very truth, the funerals of such men ought to be conducted by the light of torches and wax tapers, as though they had lived but the tiniest span. The End.